Have you ever noticed something strange about the world? How the loudest people always seem the most certain, while the truly wise sit in silence, watching, observing, calculating. We live in an age where noise is celebrated as intelligence, where confidence is faked more easily than competence, and where people argue not to discover truth but to defend their ego like it's a fragile kingdom. Every day, you see it, people who speak before they think, attack before they understand, and insist they're right even when every fact, every sign, and every ounce of common sense proves otherwise. And the frightening part? The world listens to them. The world rewards them. The world follows them. Marcus Aurelius warned us about this very danger when he wrote, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly if you can. If not, bear with them." The Stoics understood something most people today still haven't figured out. You cannot reason with arrogance dressed up as intelligence. You cannot debate someone who is committed not to truth, but to winning. And you cannot protect your mind if you keep letting foolish people drag you into battles that destroy your clarity and drain your peace. So in this video, right here on Stoic Sage Academy, we're going to break down 8 unmistakable signs of a truly foolish person. Signs you must recognize, not just to understand others, but to avoid becoming like them yourself. You'll learn how to spot these behaviors instantly, how to distance yourself from them without guilt, and how to respond to stupidity with calm, unshakable mastery instead of anger. Because here's a hard truth. Fighting fools makes you weaker. Understanding them makes you wiser. And I promise you this, if you stay until the end, the final sign might make you uncomfortable. Not because it exposes someone you know, but because it might quietly reveal something about you. Stay with me. This might be the most important lesson you learn this year. 1. They speak more than they think, the loud fool syndrome. The Stoics held silence in the same regard as courage or discipline. To them, silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of self-control. A fool, however, exposes himself not by what he understands, but by the endless stream of words he cannot restrain. We all know this person, the one who treats every conversation like a stage, who fills every gap with noise because the quiet feels threatening. They talk not to seek truth, not to expand perspective, but to assert their existence. They believe volume equals authority and constant speech equals confidence. But as Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, warned, better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. The Stoics understood that words are tools for building clarity, but in the hands of the undisciplined, they become blunt weapons. Weapons that harm others first, and later, the speaker himself. A person who talks more than they think isn't merely reckless with speech. They're reckless with perception. Their mind is so busy forming the next sentence that it never pauses to absorb what's actually being said. They miss the nuance, the silence between the lines, the subtlety that wisdom is built upon. They confuse noise for knowledge, momentum for depth, and loudness for intelligence. The fool speaks simply to be heard. The wise speak to understand. And the Stoic? He speaks only when silence no longer serves his purpose. To the Stoic, silence is not emptiness, it's mastery. It's the sacred interval between impulse and action, where truth gathers its weight, where reflection sharpens meaning, where a thought evolves into something worthy of being spoken. That pause, that breath, is where wisdom lives. Watch how easily a person exposes their weaknesses when they speak too quickly. They unveil insecurity beneath arrogance, fear beneath certainty, and ignorance beneath confidence. Many people cannot listen, because listening requires humility, the courage to admit you don't already know everything. They fill the room with words to drown out the discomfort of facing their own limitations. But wisdom begins exactly there, in the discomfort of not knowing, in the humility to say, perhaps I'm not right. Perhaps I still have something to learn. The fool avoids silence because silence forces him to confront himself. Marcus Aurelius put it with precision. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. To the Stoics, words were moral choices. Not decorations. Not entertainment. They believed every sentence should either serve truth, strengthen virtue, or remain unsaid. Speech was a reflection of discipline, character, and clarity. This is why the wise often speak less. It is not because they lack opinions, it's because they are busy observing. They are thinking, analyzing, choosing. Their words are deliberate, intentional. When a Stoic finally speaks, his words carry weight because they are forged in restraint, not impulse. Look at our modern world. Everyone has a platform, yet very few have purpose. People speak not to contribute, but to be noticed. They argue not to learn, but to dominate. Outrage is used as performance. Loudness is treated as influence. But the Stoic refuses to participate in that theater. He values presence over performance. Where others rush to respond, he pauses. Where others demand a reaction, he breathes. He knows silence unsettles the insecure, because silence cannot be defeated, debated, or disproven. Picture this: two people locked in a heated argument. One shouts, gestures wildly, desperate to prove he's right. The other stands calm, listening fully, and speaks once, clearly, and ends the discussion. Which one demonstrates power? Which one exhibits control? That is the difference between noise and strength. Real control is quiet. Real strength doesn't shout. A disciplined tongue cuts deeper than any insult. The Stoic doesn't care about winning arguments. He cares about winning himself. And in a culture addicted to reaction, restraint becomes an act of rebellion. Don't let the world fool you into believing noise equals meaning. Don't confuse confidence with clarity or speech with wisdom. Speak only when your words add value, never when your ego demands volume. Because wisdom never rushes. Wisdom resonates. And silence, when chosen with intention, speaks louder than the loudest voice in the room. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. 2. They get offended by the truth, why some people can't handle honesty. A fool does not fear lies, he thrives on them. Lies protect him, cushion him, shield him from the parts of himself he refuses to confront. But truth is his greatest enemy. Not because truth harms the body, but because it pierces the ego. It shines a light exactly where he doesn't want anyone to look. Tell a fool something honest and watch what happens. His face tightens, his voice rises, his pride scrambles to defend itself like a frightened animal. He won't question the truth itself, no, that's too revealing. Instead, he'll attack your tone, your intention, your character, anything to avoid looking into the mirror that truth holds steady in front of him. Because admitting he is wrong requires a strength he has never learned to cultivate. Marcus Aurelius once advised, if someone corrects you and shows you your mistake, consider it a gift. The wise understand this. They see truth as a form of care, even when it stings. Truth is a mirror that reveals where refinement is needed, where growth is possible, where humility must step forward. But to the foolish mind, truth is not a gift, it is an insult. They don't want precision, they want praise. They crave comfort, not clarity. They hunger for flattery, not freedom. A spoonful of pleasant deception feels safer than a drop of honest reality. That is why fools build echo chambers around themselves. They surround themselves with people who nod, agree, applaud, never challenge, never question. Their entire self-image becomes a fragile structure built on borrowed validation. One gust of truth, one honest observation, and the whole thing trembles. You see this everywhere. Someone offers sincere feedback, not to attack but to assist, and instantly the fool morphs into a defensive fortress. You're being negative. You're judging me. You don't understand. They twist the truth until it resembles cruelty, all to protect the ego that cannot bear exposure. But the Stoic does not participate in these theatrics. He doesn't argue with pride. He doesn't plead with the deluded. He knows the truth requires no bodyguard. It stands firm without anyone holding it up. Time and reality will do the work. Seneca reminded us, no man heals by denying his wound. Yet the fool hides his wounds behind layers of attitude and excuses. He hopes that if he ignores the truth long enough, it will stop being true. But the wise? They face their wounds. They open them. They clean them. And through that discomfort, they heal. Truth works the same way. Avoid it, and it festers. Face it, and you rise above it. To the Stoic, truth is not a weapon, it is medicine. It burns before it heals. It stings before it strengthens. But its purpose is never to destroy. Its purpose is to cleanse. So when you speak truth and someone grows angry, remember, you are not the target. Their battle is with reality itself. Let them rage. Let them twist your words. Let them accuse and complain. You don't have to join the chaos. Your calmness is your shield. Your composure is your advantage. Their reaction reveals them, your response reveals you. The wise do not trade their inner peace to prove a point. They do not cling to being right. They aim to be aligned with reality, aligned with reason, aligned with virtue. In a world addicted to comfort, truth becomes a quiet rebellion. To speak honestly without cruelty. To listen openly without defense. To embrace correction without shame. This is Stoic discipline. You cannot control whether someone accepts the truth, but you can control whether you remain unshaken when they reject it. And that is real power. Calm in the face of chaos. Clarity in the storm of emotion. And the understanding that truth wounds only the ego, never the wise. The Stoics taught us that true foolishness is not measured by ignorance, but by the absence of self-mastery. A mind may overflow with knowledge, yet remain shallow if it cannot govern itself. Every hallmark of a foolish person, speaking incessantly, fearing the truth, blaming others, refusing to learn, chasing attention, repeating the same mistakes, confusing confidence with competence, and mistaking noise for strength, traces back to a single root, ego untempered by awareness. Pride unexamined becomes a prison, it blinds, it inflates, and it isolates. And no pride can coexist with wisdom. To live like a Stoic is to practice the exact opposite. It is to speak deliberately and listen deeply. To embrace correction, to act with intention, and to remain composed when the world loses its mind. It is to build strength quietly, grow invisibly, and measure success not by applause, but by alignment with your values. You cannot control the foolishness of others, but you can control yourself. Their anger, their arrogance, their relentless noise, all of it is a test. Their chaos is the proving ground for your peace, your discipline, your character. Do not waste energy arguing with fools. Do not chase their validation or react to their provocations. Rise above. Outgrow their immaturity. Let your calm, your quiet resilience, speak louder than their bluster. When arrogance ends, wisdom begins. When pride loosens its grip, clarity emerges. This is the path of the Stoic, not to conquer others, but to master oneself. At the Stoic Sage Academy, we embrace this truth every day. In a world full of noise, serenity is the ultimate strength, and discipline is the highest form of freedom. Your life becomes unshakable the moment you choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with pride. 4. They refuse to listen or learn, the closed-minded trap. Nothing reveals a person's ignorance faster than the arrogance that tries so desperately to hide it. The fool walks through life certain that he already possesses every answer worth having. He mistakes familiarity for expertise, volume for intelligence, and stubbornness for strength. He listens, yes, but only enough to prepare his comeback. Every conversation becomes a battlefield he must win. Every correction feels like an insult he must deflect. He clings to his old beliefs the way a drowning man clings to a sinking ship, fiercely, blindly, and at his own expense. The tragedy is that he confuses pride with power, when in truth, pride is the very barrier that keeps wisdom locked out. A mind swollen with ego has no room left to grow. Seneca once wrote, "While we teach, we learn." The Stoics understood that true intelligence is never rigid, it is fluid, adaptable, ever-changing. The wisest minds are the softest ones, willing to bend rather than break. But the fool builds a fortress out of certainty. He turns advice into an attack. He turns truth into an insult. He turns guidance into a threat to his identity. Try to show him a better way, and he digs his heels deeper. Not because he is unintelligent, but because his ego has become fragile armor he refuses to remove. You've seen this before, the coworker who shuts down every suggestion but his own, the family member who asks questions only to reject your answers, the friend who argues with advice he begged you for. You can't teach them because they don't come to learn, they come to validate the beliefs they've already chosen. Humility is the soil where wisdom grows. Without humility, every truth simply slides off the surface of the mind like rain on polished stone. The fool remains dry, untouched, unchanged, unchallenged. The wise, however, soak up every drop. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "If someone can show me I'm mistaken, I'll gladly change, for I seek the truth, not my own victory." That is the Stoic path, the courage to be corrected, the maturity to shift direction, the strength to say, "I was wrong." Wisdom does not bloom from being right. It blooms from being willing to evolve. Observe how modern arrogance has evolved. People confuse information with understanding, headlines with knowledge, opinions with experience. They scroll endlessly yet learn nothing. They treat disagreement as an attack rather than an opportunity. They mistake their emotional reactions for well-reasoned arguments. But the Stoic has no desire to win arguments. He has a desire to uncover truth. He listens not to defend, but to understand. He knows silence creates the space where insight grows. He knows questions illuminate paths opinions cannot. And he knows there is immense strength in the simple phrase, "I don't know." Those 3 words unlock the door to learning. They loosen the grip of ego and invite reality to reshape us. The fool fears these words, he believes admitting uncertainty makes him small. But the wise embrace them, they know every master was once a beginner who refused to pretend. So when you meet someone who refuses to listen or learn, don't try to shatter their wall of pride. You will only exhaust yourself. Wisdom cannot be forced on a closed mind. Speak truth once, clearly, calmly, without attachment. Then step back and allow life to teach them what their ego resists. People who reject instruction eventually learn through consequence. And consequence is a teacher that never compromises. The Stoic stays humble because he knows the mind, like a blade, becomes dull when it stops being sharpened. He sharpens it daily, through questioning, observing, reading, listening, and reflecting. He does not fear being wrong. He fears stagnation. The fool rejects correction and remains the same. The wise seek correction and transform. And the Stoic, he listens more than he speaks, learns more than he argues, and grows every time he lets go of pride. The foolish resist guidance. The wise welcome it. And the Stoic? He grows not by defending himself, but by unlocking himself. 5. They chase attention, not self-improvement, the social validation trap. There is a quiet crisis unfolding in our generation, one the Stoics predicted long before social media existed. People no longer strive to become admirable. They strive only to appear admirable. The fool is no longer driven by the desire to grow, to refine himself, to rise above his former limitations. He is driven by the desperate need to be noticed. He treats life as a stage play where the audience matters more than the content of the performance. His self-worth rises and falls with the flickering glow of screens, with numbers that disappear as quickly as they appear. He doesn't build anything for the sake of mastery, he builds for the sake of applause. Improvement requires discipline. Attention requires only display. But the Stoics warned us, the hunger for validation is the fastest way to lose your own sense of direction. Because the more obsessed you become with being seen, the more blind you become to yourself. A man who constantly looks outward eventually forgets what he looks like inward. Marcus Aurelius said that the approval of others adds nothing to the worth of the soul. This was a man who could command armies with a word, yet understood that public praise is nothing more than a shifting shadow, beautiful in motion, meaningless in substance. Shadows change with the angle of the light, not with the reality of the object. The Stoic lives by a different compass. He acts rightly even when his actions go unseen. He does the work because the work itself strengthens him. He is not fueled by attention but by alignment, with virtue, with discipline, with truth. His character stands whether the room is full or empty. The fool cannot say the same. Remove the audience and he becomes hollow. His effort withers when there are no eyes watching. His motivation collapses the moment applause fades. He confuses attention for affection, praise for purpose, visibility for value. Attention feels like nourishment, but it only inflates the ego, it never feeds the soul. He becomes a performer of virtues he does not practice, a loud advocate for habits he does not live, a collector of compliments instead of character. He will twist himself into whatever shape gets him praise. And with each performance, he drifts further from who he truly is. Self-betrayal becomes normal. Pretending becomes easy. Authenticity becomes foreign. The Stoic, however, sees attention for what it is, a fleeting cloud of smoke, rising beautifully but vanishing without a trace. You cannot balance your identity on smoke. You cannot build resilience on applause. You cannot craft a life of depth on the shifting preferences of strangers. Just look around. We live in a world where progress is posted more than it is practiced. People showcase their journey before they've even taken the first step. They mistake sharing for doing, reputation for reality. They want to be perceived as disciplined, wise, evolving, but they don't want the discomfort required to become those things. Stoicism teaches the opposite. You transform in silence, not in spectacle. Real growth happens without witnesses, at 5 a.m. when no one is watching, during the nights when no one claps for you, in the moments where your only competitor is your former self. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And the fool suffers from the imagination of fame. He imagines admiration as a cure for all his insecurities. But the fantasy of being admired becomes a substitute for the reality of becoming admirable. The Stoic wakes each day with a different question, not, "Who will notice me?" but, "What can I improve today?" His reward is not applause but progress. Not attention, but integrity. And here is the paradox: when you stop chasing recognition, your actions begin to carry the quiet, unshakable weight of someone who cannot be manipulated by praise nor destroyed by criticism. A man who doesn't crave validation becomes untouchable. His foundation is internal. His confidence is earned. His identity is rooted in effort, not approval. That kind of strength cannot be performed. It must be built. So let others chase eyes that will forget them tomorrow. Build in silence. Do one small, excellent thing every day that no one knows about. Let your discipline, not your declarations, define you. The Stoic proves who he is without speaking. The fool speaks constantly to hide who he is not. Fools chase applause. The wise chase improvement. 6. They repeat mistakes and call it experience, the cycle of failure. There is a certain kind of foolishness that disguises itself as maturity. It's the person who proudly declares, "I've been through this before," as if endurance alone were evidence of wisdom. But repeating the same mistake doesn't make you seasoned, it makes you stuck. It's not experience the fool carries, it's a cycle he refuses to break. He doesn't learn. He simply survives. He endures the same heartbreaks, falls into the same traps, trusts the same lies, breaks the same promises, to himself and to others, and somehow concludes that suffering itself has elevated him. But wisdom isn't earned by the pain you feel. Wisdom is earned by the transformation that pain demands of you. Seneca warned, "To err is human, but to persist in error is foolish." Every mistake is a doorway to understanding, but the fool walks past those doors as if they lead nowhere. Instead of reflection, he chooses repetition. Instead of humility, he chooses pride. He wraps his failures in excuses, "This is just how I am," or "This always happens to me," as if fate were conspiring specifically to keep him unchanged. The Stoic, however, treats every mistake as a mirror, one that reflects not shame, but clarity. He studies his wrong turns meticulously, not to self-punish, but to self-correct. He knows that each misstep contains a blueprint for the next, better step. A wrong decision becomes a reference point. A painful outcome becomes insight. A failure becomes a map. Consider how often we see people trapped in the same loops, relationship after relationship, job after job, habit after habit. They keep changing the setting but not the self. They keep changing the people around them but never their patterns. They carry the same unresolved tendencies into every new chapter and wonder why every chapter ends the same way. The fool calls this experience. But it is only motion without growth. The Stoic walks a straight, deliberate path. Not because he never errs, but because he reflects, adjusts, and continues with intention. He learns quickly what the fool refuses to learn at all. He understands a universal law: life repeats its lessons until you choose to learn them. Life is not punishing you, it is teaching you. It will whisper at first, then nudge, then shout. What you call bad luck may simply be unfinished learning. A fool interprets every difficulty as misfortune. A Stoic interprets difficulty as curriculum. The difference is humility, the courage to say, "This might be my doing. This pattern might be mine. And if it's mine, I can change it." That moment of ownership is where suffering transforms into strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Obstacles are not interruptions to your path, they are the path. Mistakes are not detours, they are the foundation of mastery. But the fool stops every time the road becomes uncomfortable. He turns back at the first sign of resistance. And because he fears discomfort, he remains unchanged. To him, pain is proof of failure. To the Stoic, pain is proof of training. If you find yourself meeting the same disappointment again and again, pause. Step away from the chaos and ask the question most people are afraid to face. What am I still refusing to learn? It is astonishing how many years of repetition can end with one moment of honest self-awareness. The moment you extract the lesson, the pattern collapses. You break the loop not by running from it, but by understanding it. Modern culture glorifies surviving hardship. "I've been through so much and I'm still standing." But Stoicism challenges that. Have you been through so much and begun changing? Survival alone is not strength if it leaves you as you were. The goal isn't merely to stand after the storm. The goal is to emerge from it wiser, sharper, more aware. Stop mistaking endurance for evolution. Stop calling repetition experience. Experience without reflection is just pain on repeat. Learn. Adapt. Refine. Every mistake is a fork in the road. You can repeat your past or reshape your future. The lesson is always there, waiting for you to listen. 7. They confuse confidence with competence. How arrogance misleads. There is a subtle but dangerous form of foolishness that masquerades as strength. The fool believes that to sound confident is the same as to be capable. He equates volume with authority, certainty with skill, and a booming voice with mastery. The louder he speaks, the more convinced he becomes that he knows what he does not. And because confidence feels like power, he mistakes the intoxication of certainty for the substance of understanding. But the Stoics cautioned against this illusion. False confidence is nothing more than ignorance wearing a uniform. A man who has never doubted himself has never truly examined himself. Epictetus wrote, "A man cannot learn what he thinks he already knows." Every assertion made without self-reflection is a door slammed shut on growth. The fool wraps himself in certainty like armor, believing it protects him, when in reality it imprisons him. Every "I know" he utters builds walls around the possibility of insight. He does not seek truth, he seeks validation. And it is validation that becomes his downfall. Because arrogance, no matter how convincing, is a house built on sand. The higher he climbs in perceived confidence, the further he falls in actual competence. You can see it everywhere. In workplaces, in boardrooms, in online debates, in politics, even in casual conversations. People speak with absolute conviction about things they barely understand. They quote headlines as if they were scripture. They shout opinions as if they were facts. And society, mesmerized by the spectacle, often rewards confidence more than it does knowledge. The Stoic, however, sees through the noise. True competence breeds humility, not hubris. The more deeply you understand a subject, the more acutely aware you become of how much you do not know. The fool fears uncertainty. He believes that admitting, "I'm not sure," is weakness. The Stoic, on the other hand, embraces it because doubt is the soil where wisdom grows. Real confidence is quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It does not perform. Consider a master craftsman. He does not boast about his tools. He does not parade his skill for applause. He demonstrates mastery through precision, through calm, through results. The wise reveal strength through action, not words. The fool reveals weakness through the opposite. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without arrogance and let go without attachment." The Stoic does not chase the fleeting feeling of superiority. He chases truth. He would rather be corrected than remain comfortable. He would rather learn than win an argument. Confidence earned through skill is durable, confidence performed for attention is brittle. The fool confuses ego with identity. To challenge his ideas is to threaten his very sense of self. He defends ignorance as a warrior guards a throne built on sand. When the world eventually demands proof, he has nothing left but excuses. The Stoic, however, prepares quietly. He builds skill, questions assumptions, and practices relentlessly. His confidence is rooted in competence. It endures because it is real. In a world drowning in noise, where everyone clamors to appear certain, humility becomes a rare, powerful form of authority. Be willing to say, "I don't know." Be curious enough to find out. Let competence, not confidence, define you. Because the Stoic does not aim to look right. He aims to be right. Confidence without reason is not strength, it is arrogance, and arrogance always collapses when tested. The fool seeks the appearance of certainty. The wise cultivate the reality of competence. 8. They think loud opinions mean strength, the noise overpower illusion. There is a type of foolishness that confuses noise for authority. The fool believes that shouting makes his thoughts true. He mistakes aggression for confidence, volume for conviction, and dominance for power. Every disagreement becomes a battleground, every conversation a stage upon which he must perform. He argues not to understand, not to discover clarity, but to assert control. The louder he speaks, the more convinced he is of his superiority, and the less anyone truly listens. Strength that depends on noise is no strength at all. It is insecurity dressing itself in bravado. Seneca once warned, "He who angers you conquers you." The fool has never learned this. He believes that reacting fast is winning, that raising his voice is mastery. But the Stoics knew that real power is invisible, measured not by how loud you are, but by how calm you remain when the world screams around you. Self-control is the highest form of strength. To stay composed when provoked, to breathe while others burn with fury, to respond rather than react, this is mastery. Anger blazes and consumes, calm endures and transforms. Look around today. We see it everywhere. Social media erupts in shouting matches, politics is fueled by outrage, even in daily life people lash out over trivial slights. And yet, every outburst is surrender. Outrage is not courage, it is a voluntary handover of your peace. Every insult, every contradiction, every provocation becomes a puppet string that drags the fool wherever it will. The Stoic, however, cuts those strings. Silence unsettles the insecure far more than any argument ever could. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." And that is how the Stoic responds, not with matching volume, but by raising standards. When the fool screams, the Stoic breathes. When the fool demands to be heard, the Stoic listens. When the fool seeks to win, the Stoic seeks to understand. True strength does not announce itself. It is evident in composure, in restraint, in clarity that cannot be shaken by opinion, insult, or provocation. Consider how often people trade their dignity for the illusion of victory. They yell, insult, pound tables, and leave thinking they have triumphed. But the moment they do, they have surrendered the only thing that truly matters, the mastery of themselves. Calm is not passivity, it is strategy. It is standing so still that chaos exposes itself. It is power that requires no audience. If you want to test your strength, try this: stay silent when every instinct urges you to speak. Listen when every part of you wants to shout. Let go when you feel compelled to prove a point. That is where real strength lives, in the deliberate pause between reaction and response. The fool reacts, the Stoic decides. In a world obsessed with loudness, composure becomes rebellion. Be the one who speaks rarely but thoughtfully, who acts decisively without performing, who grows quietly while others exhaust themselves in noise. Let storms rage, it is the mountain that stands unshaken. Calm is not absence, it is mastery. Calm is the ultimate flex. 3. They blame everyone but themselves. Stop the victim mindset. Nothing keeps a person small, stuck, and powerless longer than the habit of pointing fingers outward. The fool lives in a world filled with enemies, conspiracies, and invisible forces supposedly working against him. There is always a culprit: parents who didn't do enough, friends who didn't support him, a boss who didn't appreciate him, a society that didn't treat him fairly, a universe that somehow singled him out for suffering. In his mind, he is always the victim, never the contributor. Always unlucky, never unprepared. Always wronged, never responsible. But the truth is painfully simple: it's not life keeping him trapped, it's his refusal to take ownership. The Stoics recognized this weakness long before modern psychology named it. They taught that every time you blame someone else, you quietly surrender your strength. The moment you say, "It's their fault," you declare, "They control my life." You hand over the steering wheel of your emotional state. Epictetus captured this perfectly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This is the core of all Stoic discipline: radical responsibility. Not the childish belief that every misfortune is your doing, but the mature understanding that your response, your choices, your attitude, your direction, belongs entirely to you. The fool spends his life begging the world to be fair. The Stoic spends his life mastering himself within the world that exists. Responsibility is not a burden, it is liberation. It's the one domain that cannot be taken from you. Look around and you'll see this pattern everywhere. Someone fails, and immediately the excuses pour out. The timing wasn't right. People weren't supportive. No one gave me a chance. The world is against me. But behind these smooth explanations is fear, the fear of admitting that your own decisions, habits, and shortcomings played a part. It is psychologically easier to resent the world than to rebuild yourself. That's why fools remain in the same place year after year. They've crafted a well-decorated prison of excuses. They've convinced themselves they are trapped, but the lock was never on the door, it was in their mindset. The Stoic, by contrast, does not run from failure. He examines it. He studies his mistakes like a scientist studies a specimen, not with shame, not with panic, but with curiosity. He asks, "What was my part in this? What can I learn from this? What can I do better next time?" That attitude transforms setbacks into stepping stones. Pain becomes information. Failure becomes direction. Loss becomes fuel. Seneca wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." The fool is dragged through life, kicking, screaming, blaming, pointing. The Stoic walks forward willingly, not because the path is easy, but because he understands that acceptance gives you control. What you accept, you can direct. What you deny, directs you. So when you encounter someone who always blames others, stay steady. Don't argue with them. Don't try to save them from their narrative. They are not seeking truth, they are seeking sympathy. You cannot wake a person who is pretending to be asleep. Let them speak. Let them complain. Let them cast their shadows. And walk away knowing their storm does not belong to you. The Stoic knows peace begins where blame ends. And when you feel yourself slipping into the same pattern, stop. Replace the question, "Why is this happening to me?" with, "What can I do with this?" That single shift in thinking can turn obstacles into opportunities, wounds into wisdom, and burdens into breakthroughs. The world will not always be fair. People will disappoint, betray, lie, and fail you. That is their domain. Your domain is how you rise anyway. How you endure. How you remain composed when everything outside you is chaotic. Blame is easy. Growth is difficult. One keeps you comfortable and powerless. The other makes you disciplined and unstoppable. The fool collects excuses. The Stoic collects actions. That difference, that single divergence in mindset, is what draws the line between a life of suffering and a life of strength. Responsibility does not just rebuild your life. It rebuilds you.